She was just an intern, not knowing she would take control of the millionaire who would love her, but at that exact moment, balancing a tray of champagne flutes in the golden ballroom of the Global Business Excellence Institute, Ember Porter was only thinking about not tripping over her borrowed dress from her best friend Sophia. Ember, for God's sake, stop walking like you're stepping on eggshells, whispered Sophia Chun, appearing beside her with a plate of hors d'oeuvres. You look stunning, the dress is perfect, and if any executive here doesn't notice it, they need new glasses. Easy to say when you're not the intern serving champagne to people who earn in 1 month what I earn in a year, Ember replied, nervously adjusting the black borrowed dress. The awards ceremony was buzzing with executives in Italian suits and women dripping in jewelry, but it was the man with his back to her, dark hair impeccably styled, posture that screamed command, who made her heart race without permission. When he turned around, holding a glass like someone who holds the world, Ember felt the air escape from her lungs. Steel blue eyes, expression too serious for someone so devastatingly attractive, and a corner smile that clearly said, I know exactly the effect I have. Watch the step, he said, extending his free hand when she almost slipped, saving both Ember and 3 glasses of Dom Perignon. Thank you, but I'm fine, Ember responded, too firm, too proud. I've worked here long enough to know every trap in this place. I was just distracted by the architecture. A lie. She was distracted by him. Dominic Dean raised an eyebrow, amused. At 38 years old, CEO of Dean Digital Holdings. He was used to people melting in front of him, but this young woman with clever brown eyes looked at him as if she were solving a particularly interesting math problem. The architecture is indeed impressive, he agreed, not taking his eyes off her. Neoclassical style with Art Deco influences. Do you understand architecture? I understand observing details, said Ember, noticing how he became more attentive. It's part of my job. I'm an accountant. Well, almost an accountant. Technically still an intern, but you get it. And where exactly do you work as an almost accountant intern? At Dean Digital Holdings. Accounting department, 3rd floor, desk near the window that faces that horrible gray building, she pointed vaguely. And you? Let me guess, consultant? Lawyer? You have the look of someone who makes money talking. The silence that followed was charged with something indefinable. Dominic almost choked on his champagne. Let's say I also work there, in a more administrative function. What a coincidence, she murmured, smiling in a way that made it seem like she knew some secret. I bet we've never crossed paths in the hallways. I would have remembered. Oh, how wrong she was. Dominic had been watching her for weeks through security cameras, not obsessively, just intrigued by the intern who always arrived 15 minutes early and stayed 15 minutes late, who read reports like someone reading novels and had a unique way of frowning when she found something suspicious in the numbers. From across the room, Oliver Reynolds, Dean Digital's press secretary, watched the scene with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered the best reality show of the season. My God, Dominic is flirting, he murmured to himself, discreetly photographing the interaction for his personal file of iconic corporate moments. What exactly do you do in the accounting department? Asked Dominic, trying to sound casual. Ember tilted her head, studying him with those clever eyes. I verify if the numbers make sense. I check if inputs match outputs, if transfers are properly documented, if no one is creating phantom accounts to hide transactions, double quotes, she paused, observing his reaction. And lately, well, some numbers don't make sense. The phrase hung in the air like a time bomb. Dominic felt a chill in his stomach that had nothing to do with attraction, although that was also present, undeniably. What type of numbers specifically? Those involving cryptocurrency transfers to accounts in tax havens, she said quietly, as if commenting on the weather. Small amounts, but frequent. Always at specific times, always following a pattern that would go unnoticed by less attentive eyes. Someone very intelligent trying to go unnoticed. Dominic's world stopped. Here was a 24-year-old intern in the middle of an elegant party, talking about possible fraud in his company with the same naturalness with which she would discuss the dinner menu. And what do you intend to do with this observation? Ember smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. Oh, I intend to discover who's stealing from the company. After all, she paused, her eyes shining with determination. I can't let someone harm my future boss, can I? Dean Digital is a solid company with a good reputation. I want to grow there. Dominic almost dropped his glass. You really care about the company? Of course I care. I spent 4 years studying, working 3 different jobs to pay for college, taking care of my grandmother. When I finally got an opportunity at a company like Dean Digital, I won't let someone destroy it from within. There was genuine passion in her voice that touched something deep in Dominic. How long had it been since someone spoke about his company with such affection and protection? Your grandmother. She must be proud. She is. Grandma Rose always said that honesty opens doors that cleverness can't even find. Ember smiled affectionately. She was a court clerk for 40 years. She knows all types of people. Always says she can identify dubious character from miles away. And what would she say about me? The question came out before he could think. Ember studied him for a long moment. She'd say you have good eyes, but that carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders isn't mandatory. And that men who drink champagne like it's bitter medicine are usually running from something. Dominic laughed, genuinely surprised by the precision of the observation. Your grandmother is wise and inconvenient, but I love her. Ember looked at her watch. Speaking of which, I need to get back to work. These glasses don't serve themselves, of course. It was ... enlightening talking with you, for me too. I hope to see you around the Dean Digital hallways. What's your name again? Dominic Dean. Ember Porter. Pleasure to meet you, Dominic Dean. When she walked away, balancing the tray with natural grace, Dominic stood still for several minutes, processing what had just happened. In 15 minutes of conversation, that woman had stirred emotional structures he had kept carefully locked away for years. Oliver appeared beside him like a social ninja. Interesting conversation, he commented casually. Oliver, did you hear? That the smartest intern in the company just discovered something our internal audit department didn't detect. I heard. Yes. Oliver smiled mischievously. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Dominic looked in the direction where Ember had disappeared, a strange mixture of admiration and concern growing in his chest. I'm going to find out if she's right. And then I'm going to discover what else that woman can teach me about my own company. The following Monday, Dominic arrived at the office with a strange feeling in his chest, something between expectation and panic. Ember Porter didn't know who he was, and this created a situation that was both comical and potentially disastrous. He found her at her desk, surrounded by stacks of reports and coffee that smelled strong enough to resurrect the dead. She was wearing a navy blue blouse that highlighted her eyes and reading glasses that made her look like a seductive librarian. Good morning, Ember. She looked up, and Dominic had the pleasure of seeing her blush slightly. Hi. Dominic, right? From Saturday's party? That's right. I came to check how things are going around here. And that coffee seems strong enough to be used as industrial fuel. Ember laughed, a sound that made something strange happen in his chest. Grandma Rose's recipe. Coffee strong enough to wake the dead and sweet enough to keep them in good spirits. Want to try some? Before he could answer, she was already pouring a cup from a vintage thermos. Your grandmother sends you coffee? This every morning. It says office coffee is dirty water and that I need real energy to conquer the accounting world. Ember made air quotes, smiling. She also sends a turkey sandwich that's better than any gourmet snack from the cafeteria. Dominic tasted the coffee and almost sighed with pleasure. It was perfect. Can your grandmother adopt me? There's a waiting list. I can put you on it. Ember watched him drink the coffee with an amused expression. By the way, what department do you work in again? I noticed you avoided answering directly on Saturday. It's complicated. Complicated how? Secret work? Special mission? Or are you one of those guys who inflate their own position to impress women at parties? Her brutal honesty completely disarmed him. I'm definitely not trying to impress anyone. Too bad. I'm easily impressed by men who know how to make decent coffee. Oliver Reynolds passed by at that moment, carrying a stack of press releases, and almost tripped when he saw the CEO chatting casually with the intern. Good morning, Mr. Dean, said Oliver, emphasizing the Mr. in a way that made Ember's eyes widen. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Dean? Ember repeated slowly, as if testing the sound of the words. She looked at Dominic, then at Oliver, then back to Dominic. Mr. Dean, as in ... CEO Dean? Dominic closed his eyes for a second, preparing for the storm. I can explain. You're the CEO. It wasn't a question. You're the owner of the company, and I talked about fraud to your face, criticized the company coffee, and offered to put you on my grandmother's adoption list. Technically, I'm not the owner, just CEO and founder. But ... double quotes, my God. Ember buried her face in her hands. I'm going to be fired, aren't I? And Grandma will kill me. She always says never to talk too much to strangers. On the contrary, said Dominic, pulling a chair to sit beside her, ignoring the curious looks from other employees. I want you to tell me everything about these suspicious transactions. And I want to meet the woman who can make coffee better than 5-star Michelin restaurants. Oliver, realizing he was witnessing the birth of something epic, discreetly stepped away. But not before murmuring, this is going to make a wonderful soap opera for the next 2 hours. Ember detailed her discoveries with precision that impressed even Dominic. Small amounts being transferred to accounts in tax havens, always at specific times, always following a pattern that would go unnoticed by less attentive eyes. Look here, she said, pointing at the computer screen. Every Tuesday at exactly 2:37 p.m., always the same amount, $3,500. always to the same intermediary account in the Cayman Islands, and always classified as international systems consulting. International consulting ... double quotes that doesn't exist, I checked. There are no contracts, no invoices, nothing to justify these transfers. Ember pulled another report. And there's more. The transfers started exactly 1 month after implementing the new digital security system. Whoever is doing this, she said, pointing at the numbers on screen, knows our system inside out, has privileged access, knows our internal audit schedules, knows exactly when reports are reviewed. That means ... double quotes it's someone from upper management, Ember concluded. Someone you trust. Someone who has access to sensitive information and knows your work patterns. Dominic felt the weight of betrayal before even discovering where it came from. His company, his legacy, was being corroded from within by someone he trusted. Ember, this is very serious. If you're right, I am right. Numbers don't lie, she paused, biting her lower lip in a way that completely distracted Dominic. But I need you to continue investigating, discreetly. If someone realizes we've discovered ... they'll accelerate the process or destroy evidence, Ember completed. I know. That's why I created a backup system in an encrypted personal account. All evidence is safe. You ... created an encrypted backup? I learned from YouTube tutorials. Grandma always says knowledge is never too much. Ember smiled shyly. Actually, I have some ideas about how we could track them without raising suspicions. What kind of ideas? Well, if I were promoted to senior analyst, I'd have access to more systems. I could monitor transactions in real time without seeming suspicious. And I have some college friends who work in cybersecurity ... double quotes. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Here was a woman who thought 3 steps ahead, who transformed obstacles into opportunities, who protected evidence before even knowing if she'd need it. I need you to continue investigating, he said, but discreetly. And I need you to trust me. Can I trust you? She asked directly. The question hit him in the chest. When was the last time someone questioned his trustworthiness so directly and honestly? You can, and I'll prove it. He paused. But I have one condition. Which one? I want to meet your grandmother. Any woman who can raise a granddaughter like you and make coffee like this deserves my personal reverence. Ember laughed, genuinely surprised. You want to meet Grandma Rose? I do, and I want you to teach me how to make this coffee. Considering we're going to work together on this investigation, I think I'll need all available fuel. All right, but she'll want to know your intentions. Grandma's the type who does complete interrogations on any man who appears in my life, and what are my intentions? The question came loaded with something neither was prepared to face. Ember blushed, looking away. Professional. Obviously. Obviously, he agreed, but there was something in his eyes that said otherwise. She stood up, extending her hand for a formal handshake. So, Mr. Dean, it seems we have a partnership. When she shook his hand, Dominic felt an electric current run up his arm. This, he thought, is going to be much more complicated than I imagined. 2 weeks later, Dominic discovered that working clandestinely with Ember was delicious torture. She had installed an internal communication system, coded messages sent through the corporate system that made him anxiously await each audit report. The vertical garden plants on the 12th floor need more attention, especially those in the right corner, near the executive meeting room. Immediate inspection suggested. Translation: Henry Walsh from the 12th floor was making suspicious movements near the room where board meetings took place. Dominic went up to the technology sector with some excuse about system optimization, but what he found left him uneasy. Henry, normally discreet and efficient, was visibly nervous, always checking his watch and whispering on the phone in dark corners. Henry, how are the security projects going? Everything under control, Dominic. Firewalls are being updated, encryptions renewed. Nothing to worry about. Henry smiled, but there was sweat on his forehead. By the way, I heard we hired a new analyst in accounting, Ember something ... double quotes Ember Porter. She was promoted. Why? Curiosity. I heard she's very ... observant. Sometimes overly observant people can create unnecessary problems, don't you think? The way Henry said unnecessary problems made Dominic alert. What kind of problems? Oh, new people sometimes see patterns where they don't exist, create conspiracy theories ... quotes Henry shrugged. I just think we should be careful with overly ambitious employees. Too worried, thought Dominic. Exactly what someone guilty would say. Later, at Victoria Sterling's penthouse, compliance director and one of the few people he still trusted, Dominic vented his suspicions. Victoria's penthouse was a study in minimalist perfection. White, gray, without a thing out of place. Like Victoria herself. Henry has always been reliable, said Victoria, serving an expensive red wine in crystal glasses that probably cost more than Ember's monthly salary. Maybe you're being influenced by the little intern. Ember has a clinical eye for numbers. And she's not an intern anymore. She was promoted to senior analyst. Ember, Victoria repeated. Pronouncing the name as if it were a contagious disease is an ambitious girl who might be inventing problems to stand out. You know, the type comes from a humble family, sees an opportunity to impress the boss, double quotes Victoria. She identified patterns that her own audit department didn't detect. Or she created those patterns, Victoria. Sat beside him on the Italian leather sofa, placing her hand on his arm. Dominic, you're an intelligent man, but sometimes your generosity can be exploited by less scrupulous people. There was something in Victoria's tone that bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. Do you really think she would invent fraud? I think desperate people do desperate things. And an intern who lives in Brooklyn with her grandmother certainly has reasons to. Be creative with the truth. She doesn't seem desperate. She seems determined. Exactly what a skillful manipulator would want you to think. Victoria served more wine. Darling, you need to be more careful. This girl might be playing a much more complex game than you imagine. The conversation left Dominic uneasy. While driving back to his penthouse in Manhattan, he couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's words. What if Ember was really inventing problems to stand out? What if he was being manipulated? But then he remembered her eyes when she talked about protecting the company. The genuine passion in her voice. The way she even worried about him meeting her grandmother, The next morning he decided to confront Ember directly. He found her in the archives room, organizing old documents. Her hair tied up carelessly, a dust smudge on her cheek. She was beautiful in a completely uncalculated way, and this disarmed him. Good morning, Ember. I need to talk to you. Sure. Did something happen? You seem tense. I need to know if I can trust you. The words came out harsher than he intended. Ember stopped organizing documents and turned to face him. Of course you can. Why do you ask? Some people think you might be. Exaggerating the situation to promote yourself. Ember's eyes narrowed dangerously. Some people or some specific person? Does it matter? It matters if that person is trying to discredit me because I discovered something she'd like to remain hidden. Ember crossed her arms. Who was it? Victoria. The precision of her guess surprised him. How did you... Because she's been watching me like a hawk since I was promoted. Always appears when I'm working on reports. Always asks questions about my analysis methods. Always finds a way to question my conclusions. Dominic stopped. The logic was relentless. Do you suspect her? Ember hesitated, and he realized she was fighting an internal battle. I need more evidence before making accusations. But Dominic, who else would have system access? Who else knows our internal procedures well enough to bypass audits? Ember, you're talking about the compliance director. She's responsible for preventing exactly this type of fraud. Exactly. And what better position to commit fraud than being in charge of preventing it? Ember pulled a folder of documents. Look at this. All internal audits in the last 6 months were supervised by Victoria. All approvals for new security procedures went through her. And guess who has complete access to international transfer systems? Dominic leafed through the documents, a cold sensation growing in his stomach. This doesn't prove anything definitively, double quotes, no, but it explains why she's trying to discredit me. Ember approached him, lowering her voice. Dominic, if I'm wrong, I could destroy someone innocent's career, and if I'm right, well, I might be putting my own life at risk. Her frankness hit him like a punch to the stomach. Here was a woman who could simply point fingers and cause chaos, but chose to act with responsibility and courage. Let me help. Let me protect you. You're already helping. More than you should, actually. She smiled, and there was something sad in that smile. Sometimes I wonder why you trust me so much. Why you risk your own position to investigate something that might lead nowhere. Because I'm falling in love with you, he thought. Because you're the first person in years who makes me want to be better. Because when you smile, I forget all the company numbers and can only think about what it would be like to wake up seeing that smile every day. Because you're the only person who cares enough to look for the truth, he said instead. And because you remind me why I created this company, Ember blushed, looking away. Careful, Mr. Dean. Keep being this kind and I might end up falling in love with my boss. The phrase was said jokingly, but hung in the air like a confession. Dominic took a step toward her, his heart racing. And would that be a problem? It would be complicated, she murmured, not stepping away. Very complicated. I like complicated. They were very close now, close enough for him to smell her soft perfume, for her to see the small lines around his eyes. Before either could take the next step, the door opened and Victoria Sterling appeared, elegant as always, but with icy eyes. Sorry to interrupt this. Work meeting, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dominic, we need to talk. Privately. About compliance matters that can't wait. The moment dissolved like a soap bubble. Ember stepped away, returning to the documents with flushed cheeks, and Dominic felt frustration that went far beyond professional. Of course, Victoria. Ember. We'll continue this later. When they left the room, Victoria murmured, touching scene. You should be more careful, Dominic. Mixing business with pleasure rarely ends well. And for the first time, Dominic wondered if Victoria was trying to protect him, or warn him. What Dominic discovered in his conversation with Victoria left him completely lost. She presented evidence that Ember had access systems she wasn't authorized for. Documents suggesting the young analyst could be behind the very fraud she claimed to be investigating. Think carefully, said Victoria, spreading documents across the executive meeting table, with that maternal tone she always used when wanting to manipulate someone. She appears out of nowhere at the party, accidentally discovers the fraud, gains your trust, and now has access to information that would normally take years for an intern to obtain. This is ridiculous. Ember would never ... a double quotes Dominic. Look at the facts. Victoria pointed to a system access report. She was logged into the system at 2 a.m. on Tuesday. Why would a junior employee be working at that hour unless she was doing something she shouldn't? Maybe because she's dedicated or because she was covering her tracks. Victoria sighed dramatically. Darling, I know it's hard to accept. She's young, beautiful, seems sincere. But the best manipulators always seem that way. Victoria, you're suggesting Ember created a complex fraud involving millions of dollars just to, what? Impress me? I'm suggesting she may have discovered the fraud, decided to continue it for her own benefit, and now is using you to eliminate competition. Victoria approached, placing her hand on his shoulder. You're letting personal feelings cloud your professional judgment, and that's dangerous for the company. Dominic looked at the documents, trying to find flaws in Victoria's logic, but the evidence seemed solid. Suspicious access times, transfers that coincided with days Ember worked late, a recently opened bank account in her name. Where does this bank account come from? Private investigation. When I started suspecting, I hired a security company to investigate discreetly. Victoria showed more documents. Account opened 3 days after the party where you met. First deposit, $3,500. The exact value of the fraudulent transfers. For 3 days, Dominic avoided Ember. He hated himself for it. But the doubts planted by Victoria grew like weeds in his mind. What if he was being deceived? What if his attraction to Ember was making him blind? What if she was exactly what Victoria said, a skillful manipulator? Across town in Brooklyn, Ember immediately noticed the change. The smiles disappeared. Coded messages stopped coming, and he began treating her with the cold politeness reserved for strangers. Grandma Hayes avoiding me, she said Wednesday night, helping Rose prepare dinner. And, I don't know why. Men sometimes do that when they're scared, said her grandmother wisely, peeling potatoes. The question is, scared of what? Of me? Of getting involved? That I'm a gold-digging scammer? So the last one is more likely, commented Marcus, Ember's uncle, entering the kitchen with grease-stained hands. Rich people always suspect people like us. It's self-preservation instinct. Uncle Marcus, double quotes, no. Ember, listen to what I'm going to tell you. Marcus washed his hands at the sink, speaking seriously. This guy might be handsome, rich, powerful, but deep down Hayes like all the others from the upper class. At the first difficulty, first suspicion, they throw us away like trash. Hayes not like that, protested Ember, but her voice sounded uncertain even to herself. Then why is he avoiding you? Asked Marcus gently. Why did he stop trusting you without even giving you a chance to explain? Ember had no answer for that. Thursday night, she finally confronted him in the parking garage, blocking the path to his black Tesla. What did I do? She asked directly, with the courage her grandmother had taught her. You didn't do anything. Lie. You've been avoiding me for days, treating me like I'm a stranger, and I noticed my system permissions were revoked again. Dominic sighed, running his hand through his hair. He looked tired, conflicted. Ember, we need to maintain professional distance. Professional distance? She laughed, but there was no humor in the laugh. Or did you discover something about me you don't like? His silence was answer enough. I understand, she said quietly. Someone convinced you I'm guilty, didn't they? Let me guess, Victoria, I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Your eyes say everything. Ember stepped back as if he were contagious. You know what hurts me most? It's not even you doubting me. It's you not having the courage to ask me directly. It's you preferring to believe someone who doesn't even know my family, my history, my values. Ember ... Bala quotes no. She raised her hand, interrupting him. I spent years of my life taking care of my grandmother, working to pay for college, proving him more than the circumstances I was born into. I worked 3 different jobs, studied until late hours, sacrificed dating and fun to have a chance to grow professionally. Her voice trembled with contained emotion, And when I finally find someone I thought saw me for who I really am, someone who seemed to value my competence and honesty, double quotes, she paused, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You're exactly like all the others. You prefer to believe the worst about people like me, people like you. Poor Dominic, you can say the word poor, because that's what I am, isn't it? A poor, ambitious girl who's probably trying to scam the rich, naive boss. The words hit him like bullets. Dominic found himself in front of his penthouse 2 hours later with a bottle of 40-year-old whiskey and the certainty he had made the biggest mistake of his life. At his imported mahogany desk, he looked at the documents Victoria had shown him, searching for inconsistencies. Something was wrong. The evidence was too convincing, too organized, too perfect. He picked up the phone and called Rebecca, his sister. Dominic, it's almost midnight. Did something happen? Rebecca, you're a lawyer. I need you to look at some documents for me. I think I might be being deceived. By whom? It's complicated. Can you come here? An hour later, Rebecca was sitting in his living room, analyzing the papers with the sharp look of someone who spent years in courtrooms. Brother, these documents are too perfect, she finally said. Look here, the access times are very specific, very convenient. And this bank account, double quotes, she frowned. It seems like it was created specifically to look suspicious. What do you mean? I mean, if I wanted to frame someone, I'd create exactly this evidence. Obvious enough to be discovered, but not obvious enough to seem planted. Do you think Victoria is lying? I think someone is lying. And I think you made a huge mistake doubting a woman who clearly cares about you. In the apartment in Brooklyn. Ember cried for the first time in months, while her grandmother Rose made tea and murmured words of comfort. Grandma, I fell in love with him, she confessed between sobs. And he thinks I'm a criminal. Child, said her grandmother with her decades of wisdom. If he can't see who you are, maybe Hayes not the right man for you. But I don't want him to be the wrong man, Ember cried. I want him to be the right man who's making a stupid mistake. Rose smiled sadly. Sometimes people worth having make the worst mistakes. The question is, do they learn? How will I know if he learned if I can't even work at the same company as him? Child, you're not going to quit your job because of any man. Especially not when you have real fraud to solve. Ember raised her head, wiping her tears. What do you mean? I mean, if he doesn't believe in you, you'll have to prove your innocence alone. And if you manage to do that, he'll know exactly what kind of woman he lost. Friday morning, Ember arrived at the office with a plan. If Dominic didn't trust her, shed work alone. And if her permissions were revoked, shed use more. Creative methods. Oliver Reynolds, who always had a weakness for corporate soap operas, became her involuntary ally. Darling, every company needs an unlikely heroine, he said, handing her temporary access cards. And you look like someone who's going to bring down some empires. Oliver, can I ask you something? Of course, Angel. Do you trust Victoria? Oliver made a face like head smelled something rotten. That viper? Darling, I wouldn't trust her to choose my breakfast. Why? Just intuition. And do you know anyone who could help me with digital investigation without questions? I know an ex-boyfriend who works in cybersecurity. He owes me some favors. The kind I can't mention in a professional environment. Perfect. I need him to analyze some systems without leaving traces. Ember, you're playing with fire. No, Oliver. I'm trying to put out a fire before it destroys everything that matters. What Ember discovered early Saturday morning, working with Carlos, Oliver's cybersecurity expert ex-boyfriend, was worse than anyone had imagined. The fraud wasn't just about cryptocurrency theft. It was about deliberate and systematic destruction. Look at this, said Carlos, pointing to complex codes on the screen. Someone installed a very sophisticated virus in the system. It's not just to steal money. It's to create instability, make the company lose credibility in the market. And then someone buys the shares for a fraction of their real value. It's a classic market scam, but executed brilliantly. Ember studied the data, her mind working quickly. Carlos, can you track who installed this? Already did. And you want like the answer. He showed access logs. Victoria Sterling and Henry Walsh working together for at least 8 months. 8 months, quotes Ember. They're not just stealing. They're preparing a corporate coup. Look here. Carlos pulled up other documents. And they've already bought stakes in competing companies, already have agreements with investors to take over Dean Digital when it goes into crisis. Very intelligent, thought Ember, printing documents on a printer in the back of the building. Very cruel, and about to end. But first she needed to deal with a personal matter. Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, she was at the doorman's desk of Dominic's building with a box of evidence and unshakable determination. Mr. Dean hasn't authorized any visits, said the doorman. Tell him Ember Porter's here with evidence that can save his company. And tell him if he doesn't see me, I'm going straight to the financial press. 5 minutes later, she was in the elevator. Dominic answered in a robe, looking like he'd spent the night awake thinking about his own mistakes. Ember? How did you get your address, Oliver? Convince the doorman? Journalistic threat. Can I come in, or do you prefer I shout your truths here in the hallway? He made room and she entered like an elegant storm. Before you say anything, she said, dumping the documents on the coffee table, I want you to see this, and then I want an explanation about why you chose to believe falsified documents, instead of believing the person who risked her own career to save your company. For an hour, she detailed each discovery. The emails between Victoria and Henry planning the company's destruction. The accounts in tax havens already being prepared to receive stolen assets. The virus installed to cause instability. The plan to force Dominic to sell his stake for a pittance and then resell to foreign investors. The documents Victoria showed you were all falsified, she said, showing Carlos's analysis. Look at the dates. They were created Wednesday night, right after she saw us together in the archives room. Ember, I am not finished yet, she interrupted, her voice trembling with contained rage. Do you want to know why Victoria discredited me? Because she realized I was getting too close to the truth. And you, instead of trusting the person who was risking her own career to save your company, preferred to listen to the person who was trying to destroy it. How can I compensate me? Ember laughed bitterly. You can't, but you can do the right thing now. She stood to leave, but he grabbed her hand. Ember, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You showed who you really are when things got difficult. And I showed who I am by saving your company even after you humiliated me. You're right, I was an idiot. A coward. A man who doesn't deserve either the love I felt for you or the respect I still have for the company you created. The words love I felt hit him like a stab wound. Felt? In the past? Ember stopped at the door without turning around. In the past, Dominic. Definitely in the past. Ember, wait. He went to her, turning her to face him. I know I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I can't let you walk out of my life like this. Why not? Because, double quotes, he hesitated, then decided on total honesty. Because I fell in love with you, hopelessly. And because you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. And because if I let you leave, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. Too bad you didn't think of that before treating me like a criminal. You're right, but give me a chance to fix this. A chance to prove I can be the man you deserve. Ember studied him for a long moment, fighting against her own heart. Dominic, I can't simply forget that you doubted me. I can't pretend it didn't hurt me. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to give me the chance to win back your trust. How? Let me start by doing the right thing. Let's confront Victoria and Henry together. As a team. As partners. Professional partners, to start with. And then hopefully you can forgive me enough to give me a chance to win your heart back. Ember sighed, anger giving way to emotional exhaustion. All right, let's finish this. But afterward, afterward, we need to talk. Very seriously. On Monday, Dean Digital Holdings exploded. With the evidence Ember had collected, Victoria's arrest was swift and humiliating. Henry tried to flee the country but was intercepted at the airport with false passports and a suitcase full of money. The specialized press called it the most impressive case of internal investigation ever recorded in the American market. How did you discover the fraud? Asked a reporter during the press conference. Numbers don't lie, Ember responded calmly. You just need to know how to read them. And what was the CEO's role in the investigation? Ember looked at Dominic, who was beside her at the conference table. Mr. Dean gave me complete freedom to investigate, even when it meant questioning people in positions of power. Without that support, we never would have reached the truth. It was a generous half-truth, and both knew it. After the conference, Dominic found her in her new office. She had been promoted to compliance director, ironically assuming Victoria's position. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For protecting me at the conference. For not telling the truth about how I doubted you, I protected the company. Not you, she said, organizing papers on her new desk. The last thing Dean Digital needs now is a scandal about the CEO who was almost fooled by his own compliance director. Even so, thank you. They stood in silence for a moment. Ember, about our conversation, double quotes, not here, Dominic. Not at the office. Then where? I don't know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe some things can't be fixed. I don't believe that. Then you'll have to prove me wrong. On Thursday, a storm hit New York. Ember was on the company rooftop, trying to solve a problem with the internet antennas, one of many small crises that seemed never to end when it started to rain. Dominic appeared with an umbrella, but she refused help. I prefer to get wet, Ember, for God's sake. You're going to catch pneumonia. Better than catching feelings for people who don't deserve them. I deserve a second chance. Based on what? Based on the fact that I recognize my mistake. Based on the fact that I learned from it. Based on the fact that that what? That I love you completely, desperately, and that I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. They stood there, she soaked and stubborn, he holding a useless umbrella, until they started laughing at the absurd situation. We're two adults behaving like teenagers, he said. Speak for yourself. I'm a competent professional who hates you in a very mature way. You don't hate me, I do hate you. Ember ... Say my name like that, like what? Like it means something to you. Dominic dropped the umbrella and held her face between his hands. It means everything to me. You mean everything. And there, in the middle of the rain, on top of a building in New York, he kissed her as if life depended on it. And maybe it did. When they separated, breathless, Ember murmured, "This doesn't solve everything. I know. But is it a beginning?" It's a beginning. Epilogue. 1.5 years later, Ember adjusted her cream blazer, much more expensive than any she had ever owned, and smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Compliance Director of Dean Digital Holdings, equity participation in the company, and an engagement ring on her finger that still made her sigh from time to time. From the office adjacent to hers, she heard Dominic talking on the phone in a mixture of English and Mandarin, negotiating with Chinese investors. He had changed a lot in recent months. Less controlling, more collaborative, more willing to listen to opinions different from his own. "Ready?" he asked, appearing at the door that connected their offices. "Ready for the meeting with the Chinese investors, or ready for our life?" "Both things." She turned around, fixing his tie with automatic gestures of intimacy. "You know you don't need to wear a tie every day anymore, right? The company won't end if you show up in a polo shirt." "Old habits. Obsessive control habits, you mean?" Dominic laughed. In recent months, he had learned to laugh at himself. One of many gifts Ember had given him. "Speaking of family," he said, organizing documents for the meeting, "is your grandmother still convinced I only proposed because she taught me that cornbread recipe I love?" "Completely convinced. And Uncle Marcus still thinks you'll trade me for a socialite as soon as you get tired of playing poor. Your Uncle Marcus is a wise man. I can learn a lot from him about family protection." "Are you serious?" "Completely. Someone who cares so much about protecting you deserves my respect." It was this kind of change that made Ember fall in love with him a little more each day. "How's my favorite niece?" he asked, referring to Maya, Ember's cousin who had gotten an internship at the company. Terrified. "I think she still can't believe she works at the same company as the famous family CEO. And Tyler. How's college going?" "Well, he decided to study business administration. I think he wants to follow our footsteps." "Our footsteps?" "Dominic Dean, if you haven't noticed, you've become a role model for my family, ... He interrupted her with a quick kiss. "Oliver said he has a surprise for us today," she commented, applying lipstick. "I'm afraid of Oliver's surprises. He just wants us to meet his new boyfriend. Apparently Hayes, a federal judge who loves corporate gossip as much as he does. Perfect." As if our life wasn't dramatic enough already, the intercom buzzer interrupted the conversation. "Mr. Dean?" came the receptionist's voice. "Your father is here." Dominic frowned. Thomas Dean rarely visited the office and never without warning. "Send him up." "Your father?" asked Ember. "I thought you two didn't talk much." "We don't. That's why I'm surprised." Thomas Dean entered the office 5 minutes later, imposing as always, but there was something different in his posture. Something more, ... Human Dominic, Ember, he greeted both formally. "Sorry for the unannounced visit. Did something happen, Dad? I wanted to talk to you both." About family." Dominic and Ember exchanged surprised looks. "I've been following the news about the company," Thomas continued. "About how you handled the crisis. About the investigation, ... T looked directly at Ember. "And I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For saving the company my son built. And for making him more human." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. "Dominic was always brilliant," Thomas continued, "but there was a coldness in him that worried me. A need to control everything that ... well, that I recognize in myself." "Dad ... let me finish." Thomas turned to Ember again. "You changed that. You taught him to trust, to collaborate, to be happy." Ember felt tears welling up in her eyes. "And I wanted you to know you have my blessing. Officially. And that, I'd like to meet your family, Ember, your grandmother, your uncles, your cousins, if you'll allow it." "Of course," said Ember, moved. "They'll love meeting you, and Dad," said Dominic, his voice slightly trembling. "Thank you." After Thomas left, Ember stopped getting ready and turned to face Dominic. "Do you regret it? All the confusion that came with meeting the problematic intern?" Dominic pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "My only question is, why did it take you so long to take away my control?" "Patience, love. I still have many plans to destabilize your overly organized life." "Good," he murmured against her lips. "I was starting to think you were losing your touch." "Never. And now we're going to be late for the meeting. So be it. Some delays are worth it." Outside, New York buzzed with its infinite energy. Dean Digital Holdings prospered under Dominic's new, more collaborative administration, influenced by Ember's democratic advice. And in an apartment in Brooklyn, Rose prepared lunch for the engaged couple, murmuring to Whiskers, who had become inexplicably affectionate since Dominic started showing up with expensive treats, about how the best love stories always begin with someone discovering something they shouldn't. In the late afternoon, after a successful meeting that secured investment for international expansion, Ember and Dominic walked hand in hand through Central Park. "You know what makes me happiest?" she said, watching an elderly couple feeding ducks at the lake. "What? It's not even the fact that we worked out. It's the fact that we chose to work out. Even after all the mistakes, all the misunderstandings, we chose to fight for what we had. And don't you regret choosing the guy who doubted you? I regret that you doubted. I don't regret giving you a second chance. What's the difference? The difference is that people with integrity deserve second chances when they recognize their mistakes. And you, Dominic Dean, however idiotic you were always a person of integrity." He stopped walking and turned her to face him. "I love you. Unconditionally. Definitely. And forever. I love you too. But if you ever doubt me again because of someone else's gossip, I'll kill you. Deal. And if you ever investigate fraud alone without telling me again, I'll lock you in the office. Deal." They sealed the agreement with a kiss. There in the middle of the park, surrounded by the pulsing life of New York, two people who learned that true love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about always choosing to try again. Some people are born to control. Others are born to destabilize control. And the lucky ones find someone who teaches them that the best in life happens when you learn to live without any control, just with lots of love, lots of trust, and the certainty that together they can face any storm. 6 months later, at the wedding celebration held in the garden of Grandma Rose's house in Brooklyn, Oliver would give the most emotional speech of his career. Ember and Dominic taught us that the best love stories aren't about two perfect people who find each other. They're about two imperfect people who choose to grow together, who choose to trust even when it's difficult, who choose to fight for love even when everything seems lost. And while the newlyweds danced their first dance to a song Ember had chosen because Dominic finally learned that giving up control was sometimes the smartest decision he could make, everyone present knew they were witnessing not just a wedding, but the celebration of a story that proved true love still exists. The love that transforms, the love that heals, the love that teaches that being vulnerable isn't weakness, it's the greatest courage anyone can have. So did you enjoy this emotional love story? If you made it this far, it's because you really got involved with Ember and Dominic. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a like. And hit that notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. Subscribe to the channel too, because this way you'll be helping not just me, but also other people who, just like you, love a good romance story to touch their hearts. When you like, share, and subscribe, you help these stories reach more people who need a little bit of romance and emotion in their lives. And who knows, maybe you'll find your own love story out there. Tell us in the comments, what was your favorite part of the story? Did you root for Ember and Dominic to get together from the beginning? See you in the next story.